Okay, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Finding Wendy, my journey, our journey to wellness. And I have a very, very special guest today. I am so pleased to welcome New York Times best-selling author Jen Stevens, who wrote the book Fast, Feast, Repeat. So the guru god of intermittent fasting. She's all over the internet, all over everything, all over podcasts. Let's hear from you today, Jen. Please introduce yourself and who you are, what you're doing, and just go for it.
Well, that's really funny. You said I was all over the place because that's just been the story of my life. From the time I could walk, I was all over the place. And so now I'm all over the place with intermittent fasting. So for anybody who has not found me yet, I'm really a teacher. I'm a school teacher. I'm now retired from school teaching, but I taught school for 28 years. And so I'm trying to deliver content, which is what I do now. It's just different content. And like you and so many people who are watching and listening to your podcast, I struggled with my weight for a long time. You know, you may look at me today or look at anything that I've put out in the world since, I guess I first started putting things out into the world, I guess in 2015 when I started my first Facebook group. But if you look at the stuff I put out into the world, I just look like I'm at a healthy weight and like I've never had a weight problem. But I was someone who yo-yoed and struggled and tried everything until when 2014 rolled around, I found myself at 210 pounds and I am 5'5", so that put me in the obese category. And, you know, I had to do something. And so my journey of weight loss and weight maintenance has been a story of intermittent fasting. And so I just started telling people about it, right? I started telling people that I knew because they're like, how'd you do it? You just lost a lot of weight. And then I started helping my friends do it. And then it just, you know, snowballed from there. And then I ended up with the Facebook group that grew and grew, and then another Facebook group. And then I wrote a book because people who were joining the Facebook group wanted to know how to get started. And so I wrote my first book and started podcasting in 2017. Yes, 2017 is when I started podcasting. And then I had a second podcast in 2018. And so it's just kind of grown really organically from just wanting to share with the people that I knew to unexpectedly really sharing with the world. And so here I am. I'm a school teacher, like I said. I've done it. I've lost the weight. I've kept it off. And I have devoured all of the content. Luckily, devouring content does not break fast. And so my job is just to disseminate the best information about intermittent fasting and help people learn to view it as a lifestyle and live it as a lifestyle.
And that's the key, the lifestyle, because as you and I both have experienced so many diets. So, you know, calories in, calories out. Go to the gym. Do this, do that diet. Do Jenny Craig, do Weight Watchers, do all of these diets. And they all work, but if you start practicing them, you start regaining the weight you lost. Plus the fact there's so much metrics that you have to keep track of. I was getting sick and tired of, yet again, looking at an app or writing down how many calories, how much fat, how much protein, how much carbohydrates, looking and reading all the packages and whatever. And if you just want to do a little show and tell and start with your books and just show your books and say your books for people that are listening. So what was your first book that you wrote?
Well, my first book was this little one here, although this is the second edition. So if you have a copy of the first edition, it doesn't have the white banner at the top. The picture goes all the way to the top. But this is the second edition of the book that started it all.
And that's called, for our listeners,
Delay, Don't Deny, Living an Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle. Yeah, I forgot some people are going to be listening, not watching.
Yes, a lot of people listen. Yeah.
Delay, Don't Deny, Living an Intermittent Fasting Lifestyle. And I wrote this one, as I mentioned earlier, I had a Facebook group that kept growing and growing and growing. And we had a pinned post. Have you ever been in a Facebook group where they have a pinned post and they're like, read the pinned post first?
Pinned post?
pinned, Pinned, a
A
pinned
pinned
post.
post.
You
Yeah.
pin it to the top.
Yeah.
And so when people join the group, you direct them to the post that you have pinned at the top that like lets you know what the group's about. And this is before the days of like people answering questions to join groups. Like people just, they just put in a request. That was it. It was before you had rules. I mean, this is like 2015, 2016, early Facebook group days. So people would just wander in off the Facebook street and we would say, okay, go read the pinned post. And it got longer and longer and longer. The more we knew, what we recommended, it was all in that post. And people would be like, well, how do I get started? And we're like, well, read the pinned post and then ask questions. But it kept getting longer and longer. And they're like, well, what book should I read? And we're like, well, you could read The Obesity Code. Dr. Jason Fung was out by this point, but he doesn't really talk about, time restricted eating or the eating window approach. And we also have different recommendations about, what you have during the fast than he does. So, keep this in mind. So eventually it just got to the point where I, as the teacher, said, there isn't a resource for people that has everything that I want them to know. So I've just got to create it myself. And that is why I wrote my first book. And I just put it out there. I self-published it. And that was the beginning of Delay Don't Deny. And again, the first edition, you can still find the first edition, but right now I want people to start with the second edition because it's been updated. I just updated it in August of 2024. So it has updated information about the clean fast and updated success stories. And that's the one I would have you start with. But that book kept growing, word of mouth. I just talked about it in my Facebook groups and talked about it in my podcast. But the most powerful part about it is that people told their friends, right? Just like when I started, my friends wanted to know what I was doing to finally lose the weight. And I lost 80 pounds and I've kept it off. But people wanted to know how I did that because they had seen me yo-yoing for a long time. And they had seen me trying the crazy diets over and over again. And they're like, wait a minute, Jen's crazy diet seems to have worked this time. What is it? And so other people started sharing Delay Don't Deny, and it just started growing and growing and growing. And then the podcasts helped it grow. My podcast, Intermittent Fasting Stories, that I started in 2018, brought more and more people in through the stories. And so I said, as time went on, there were some things about the original Delay Don't Deny that needed to be updated. And so I thought about getting Delay Don't Deny traditionally published.
Yeah.
I also had some book pirating going on. So that's what led me to my second book.
What do you mean book pirating? What is that?
Oh, there was a whole thing that went on in with Amazon in 2018. Suddenly the paperback of Delay Don't Deny stopped selling. And like in a week, one copy would sell. Long story short, someone had pirated the book. There was like a pirated version that was being sold through the buy box. You may not even recognize this as an Amazon shopper. When you go to Amazon and you look for a book or anything, you just go to the listing for the book and you click buy now or add to cart. Do you know where that book is coming from? You think it's coming from Amazon, but what had happened is there were some third-party sellers and someone had pirated my book and they were making contraband copies of the book.
Wow.
There were typos on the back cover that were not on the original. And it's crazy. The whole thing was in a different font. When you put them side by side.
I didn't even know that was possible.
I know. But finally.
I mean, I know it's possible with clothing. That's why it's really, really, like, I'm very suspicious when I see especially on Instagram, and you click on one ad and then all of a sudden there's all these other ads that are almost exactly the same, but a different company, and it's the same product. It's like, these must all be bootleg products or something.
Well, there were, and it was crazy. And finally we got Amazon to acknowledge what was happening. Another author is the one who cued me into it. He emailed me out of the blue and said, I noticed that a third-party seller is selling your book, and that third-party seller was also selling mine, and I got some and they're counterfeit. You may want to check yours. And it just blew my mind. But it suddenly explained why only one copy was selling, right? That's not what was happening. There were really, Amazon anyhow. So Amazon fulfills orders. So like, let's say you're a third-party seller and you had 1,000 contraband copies of any book. The Obesity Code, I'm sure, has had the same problem. Every book that does well, somebody comes along and pirates it. So anyhow, hopefully Amazon is cracking down on that just a bit. But all of that left me feeling a little vulnerable because, I was counting on my books for income, right? I was
Yeah.
making money on the books, and then suddenly that dried up before we got the pirating figured out. And so I was like, I think it's time for me to traditionally publish. And initially, I wanted to traditionally publish Delayed on Deny, but instead, we ended up with a whole new book, Fast, Feast, Repeat. And you can see the difference when you look at the two.
Yeah.
Here's Fast, Feast, Repeat, and here's Delayed on Deny.
Yeah.
So
One
Fast,
is for
Feast,
the
Repeat.
listeners. One, Fast Feast Repeat, is like a smaller but thicker book, and Delay Don't Deny is more of a thinner, taller, skinnier book.
Yeah,
So you
Fast,
have
Feast, Repeat is 340 pages,
Yeah.
and Delayed on Deny is 189. So you can see there's a whole lot more in Fast,
Yeah.
Feast, Repeat. So it's comprehensive. So I was able to traditionally publish Fast, Feast, Repeat, and it's more comprehensive. So when people are like, well, what do I start with? I would start with Delay Don't Deny to understand the basics. And when you're ready for a deeper dive, that's when Fast, Feast, Repeat is going to be there for you. And, I know the listeners can't see it, but people who are watching can. Your Fast, Feast, Repeat has got all sorts of sticky tabs throughout it.
Oh, gosh.
And so
Yeah.
the fast, and so does Fast Start Day by Day. This is the book that you can refer to like a year from now when you have a question and you're like, wonder what's happening, with such and such. You can go back to Fast, Feast, Repeat and find it. Or when you have a question, when you start, you might not even think to ask, but a year from now, you might have a new question, and you can use the index of Fast, Feast, Repeat or the frequently asked questions section. So that's how Fast, Feast, Repeat came about. It's like a little step up.
You have the 28-day
Yep.
fast start.
Yep. And this book was written because in Fast, Feast, Repeat, there is a chapter called the 28-day fast start. And it's just pretty basic. It tells you how to get started. But some people need more support. Like if you start with Fast, Feast, Repeat and start reading on page 1 and go straight through, it's really like almost information overload if you're new. And so that's why 28-day fast start day by day is the school teacher in me coming out, because some people need more support day by day. Just tell me what I need to know on day 1. What do I need to know on day 2? And so it's just little bite-sized pieces for every day. And it's also got a write-in component for people, like little journaling for each day where you can, make your plan for the day before it starts. Then you have your day, then you reflect on your day, and it's got just a little lesson. It's not going to take you long. And then also some inspiration from past intermittent fasters. So really it's just, the whole journey of, intermittent fasting from start to finish. There are resources to support you every step along the way.
So when I started and got introduced to intermittent fasting, I started with Dr. Jason Fung's book,
Right.
The Obesity Code.
Uh-huh.
And it blew my mind. It was quite the read, but I have dyslexia, so I listen to Audible and I look at the words at the same time. And I also had a Kindle version of it, so I would highlight in the Kindle sections and come back to it and review it. And, it's a bit more of a scientific approach. And so my first few weeks of practicing intermittent fasting was with Dr. Jason Fung's fellow Torontonian. I'm here in Toronto, so is Dr. Jason Fung approach. And then, and I actually did the 24-hour one day with one small meal, and then the next day was 3 meals. I think there's a certain terminology. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can practice intermittent fasting. And I did the 24-hour start, which was way too difficult for me.
For the beginning. Yeah.
For the beginning, because it was really at hour 20, between hour 20 and 24, I was literally feeling sick to my stomach. It was just really, really hard. And so after, I can't remember how I got introduced to your book. I think
I know how. Was it Fred?
Fred. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was Fred.
So,
I remember it was Fred. Fred is someone, for everybody who doesn't know, Fred is somebody that he's actually been on Intermittent Fasting Stories, and he was a moderator back in the day when I was on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but he was one of my moderators in my Facebook groups, and he is part of my community now. So we love Fred.
Yeah, so through Fred,
Mhm.
actually, I discovered. I'm so glad you reminded me because I don't know. I can't remember how this all goes because I've been doing this
Yeah.
since a few months now, and
Right.
anyway, so I threw out Dr. Fung's book, or I didn't throw it out. It's still there, but I thought, okay, so now I'm going to do it differently, and I'm going to, start with the 12-hour window, and then,
Mhm.
move up from there. And now I'm up to a 19 or 20-hour window. And it was very interesting because it was like, okay, now you have to have black coffee, and
Right.
because this is the difference between Dr. Jason Fung's method is that when you have coffee, you can put in like whole cream or whipping cream. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I can handle that. But now
Here's
with
the
the
part that's
clean,
funny. The part that's funny about Jason Fung's work is he like with the cream, he's like, you can have a little bit, but if you need it. But I like you're just like, well, if I can, I'm going to.
yeah,
But really, what's so funny is before I read the obesity code, I had already lost 75 pounds before I read the obesity code.
okay,
And in my whole story is in Delayed on Deny in the back. In the very, very end, I tell my whole story. And I was not fasting clean when I started. And I'd never heard of Jason Fung. His books were not out. He hadn't done anything yet before then. So his first book, The Obesity Code, came out in March of 2016. So I actually started dabbling in fasting in 2009. It didn't
mm,
stick until 2014. But you remember, there were not a lot of resources out there about it, right?
no,
And which is one reason why I wrote my first book, because the resources were scant. And every single thing that you read about fasting until the obesity code, until that book came out, every book, video, anything, blog post about intermittent fasting said intermittent fasting works because you're eating fewer calories. The short period of time allows you to eat fewer calories.
which we
Even
know is
all,
wrong.
well, we know there's a lot more to it than that now. Maybe you are eating fewer calories, but there's so much more that goes on than just, how many calories you're eating with your metabolism and what hormones are
Autophagy.
all of that stuff, right? So when I was fasting, I was not fasting clean when I lost my first 75 pounds. But the interesting part is I had started regaining the weight. So basically, I was putting stevia in my coffee. I might have a little latte in there. And I thought I was fasting because it was, just a little latte. What could that matter? It didn't matter so much. And, there was this whole train of thought that 50 calories or less it was fine. Or, I was having diet sodas. I was chewing gum nonstop. And so I was highly motivated because I had been obese. So I was white knuckling it every day until my eating window. And I had started to gain weight a little bit. I was regaining the weight, which, of course, if you dieted before, you always do regain the weight. So I wasn't surprised, but intermittent fasting was turning out the same way as everything else. So then the obesity code came out in 2016, and I read it. I was so excited to read it and finally understood the flaws with calories in, calories out. That was the first time I'd ever heard anyone talk about insulin. And what's so funny is Jason Fung convinced me to fast clean, even though he wasn't. We came up with the terminology clean fasting in 2017 in my Facebook group.
Ah,
I'm the
okay,
first
okay.
person
That's
I'm the
where it
first
comes
person.
from.
I invented
Okay.
the phrase clean fast. I made that up in 2017. But it was after reading the obesity code that I learned about the cephalic phase insulin response. And the thing about the cephalic phase insulin response is it's not just sweetness that's going to cause it, but that delicious cream that you're putting in there too. Brains know that cream is going to have you're going to have an insulin response from cream as well. So, that part never made sense why you would say don't have, the sweet taste, but a little bit of cream. When you really understand the insulin response, you're not going to want cream either because we have a very strong insulin response to dairy, believe it or not. And also, when I was continuing to research in 2017 for my second book, Feast Without Fear, it's probably one you've never heard me talk about. But in that one, I learned we even have an insulin response to protein. Like some protein sources, you have a higher insulin response to those protein sources than even to carbohydrates. So an insulin response is not just a sweetness or carbohydrates, but it happens, to dairy and all sorts of things. So anyway, when I read the obesity code and understood the cephalic phase insulin response and that was linked to sweetness or food flavors, think about it. Your brain understands food is coming in. You taste a diet soda, your brain says, we know what sweetness is. It comes with a glucose load. So it primes your body for this glucose load by releasing a little pulse of insulin from your pancreas. That's the cephalic phase or brain-based insulin response. Well, if we're trying to keep insulin low, which I learned from Jason Fung, it's so important to keep insulin low, you wouldn't want to do that.
Nope.
You wouldn't want to have an insulin response. You want to keep it to a bitter flavor profile, which does not stimulate an insulin response. And so black coffee, plain tea, those are bitter flavor profiles. And we don't have an insulin response to those bitter flavor profiles. But dairy, you will.
And are there any other foods or drinks that our bitter response do not affect your pancreas? Have you discovered any?
The thing is that, things that can taste bitter but still have digestive responses. So we really just want to stick to black coffee, plain tea, plain water, plain sparkling water. You see, I'm drinking my unflavored San Pellegrino right now because even, the fruity flavors, our Jason Fung introduced me to the cephalic phase insulin response, but then he's like, oh, put a little lemon in your water. Oh, have this herbal tea that is flavored with fruit flavors. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense because your brain is going to perceive the fruit flavors the same way it perceives the diet soda. It's a sweet food flavor. So your brain doesn't understand the difference between, herbal apple cinnamon tea that has 0 calories and someone is actually eating apples. So you don't want to have those fruit flavors either. So in the work that Jason Fung and Megan Ramos have put out, Megan Ramos had a book about fasting in women, and they're now using the terminology clean fast as well. But they're like, you can fast clean, and that might be better, and then they use the words fasting training wheels. And I'm just going to tell everybody, you don't need fasting training wheels because the fact that you think it's going to be easier to have the cream, you got your little training wheels, that's actually making it harder. Because once I read the obesity code and realized about the cephalic phase insulin response, non-negotiable for me became, I'm going to protect my fast if I'm going to do it. And so I started with black coffee. It was hard. I didn't want to, but I did. Black coffee. I don't like tea, so that's easy. But I dropped all those herbal teas with the fruity sweet. I used to drink pomegranate tea, all of that. I stopped it. I stopped with the water enhancers. I was drinking Zevia soda. I stopped with all of that. I got rid of the gum.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing was I no longer had to white knuckle it.
No. And that's the thing when I started with the black coffee, because I started with the lattes like you did.
I get it.
We talked about it. I made a big effort of making sure that my coffee was the best coffee I could possibly make. So I grind the beans, fresh beans, Italian beans, with every cup of coffee, and use my espresso machine to make it. And it's actually quite smooth. It's not bitter. It's a very smooth coffee that doesn't, it almost tastes like there's milk in it because it's so smooth and not bitter. So I'm okay with drinking 2-3 cups of this coffee every morning until my window opens at 2:00, which it's now open, and I have my fruit and yogurt beside me here. But the interesting thing about Dr. Jason Fung's book that I found very, very helpful is the emphasis on highly processed foods and junk food.
Yeah.
And the whole discussion about chemical sweeteners. So stevia, sweet and low, because let's face it, North Americans drink an awful lot of diet soda, diet pop, diet Coke. My nephew drinks so much diet Coke. And it's just really, really hard when people are well, I'm drinking Diet Coke, so I don't have to worry about the calories. And I'm like, wrong. You have to worry because it's your pancreas or your brain is getting this signal saying, oh, there's a sweet liquid in my body, and I'm just going to tell my pancreas to wake up and put some more insulin into my body.
Right.
And it just, when I have the conversation with people, especially who are really addicted to diet products, and they always have to have like Diet Coke or diet root beer or whatever, diet this and diet that. I think the most important thing, and I also learned that from Dr. Huberman's podcast when he was interviewing some neuroscientist about chemicals, that some chemicals, like most of the chemicals from stevia and sweet and low, your brain doesn't know what it is. It just stores it into fat because it doesn't know how to process. And that's why I switched. When I do have a creamy coffee in the afternoon, my window's open, I put in sugar. I put in real sugar because your brain knows what sugar is, whereas your brain doesn't know what sweet and low and stevia and all that kind of stuff is.
And I think it causes a lot of metabolic confusion because your body is supposed to be sensing nutrients coming in. And then you got this artificial stuff coming in, and your body's like, what is all that?
What is all that?
And your body knows it's wrong, but it doesn't understand why. So, a lot of problems. And so if diet sodas were helpful, we would have seen people getting slimmer over time, but that's not what we've seen.
No. And it's just, always the hamburger French fry with the diet soda.
Right.
And it's like, so I'm balancing it out. So it's not 1,000 calories, it's 900 calories or whatever, but it's just, it's like getting the calorie or diabetic brain out of your brain. That's the part that I enjoy the most about intermittent fasting, because I must admit that I wrote a little backstory about myself. And what I realized is that over the last 50 years, I have lost and regained over 800 pounds.
Wow.
And so I am the most, I'd say, professional dieter on the planet in this, or at least in my circle, because I know how to lose the weight. I just didn't know how to keep it off.
Right.
And the thing about intermittent fasting, this is the easiest thing I've ever done, because
I love it.
Believe me, I've done 50 years of this because I haven't been obese. My highest weight was 450 pounds.
Wow, Wendy.
And at that point, I discovered bariatric surgery. And as everybody knows from my podcast, and all my friends and family know, I had the bariatric surgery to deal with this 450-pound body and mindset or whatever in 2018. And the pandemic came, and I started regaining weight. And I had bariatric surgery. So I thought the bariatric surgery was the magic pill. Right. Because they took out 3/4 of my stomach with VSG surgery. And I was shocked. I was like, what the F? That's not possible.
And then you feel like you're a failure. How is this happening? What's wrong with me?
And so what's happening with bariatric and so many other bariatric people out there, they don't talk about the weight regain because they're embarrassed, because they thought they went through this huge surgical procedure and had 3/4 of their stomach taken out with VSG or with Roux-en-Y or bypass. They don't even, their stomach isn't even used anymore. They have a pouch. And so they start regaining weight, and it's like so embarrassing. They're like, what do I do now? I've tried every diet on the earth. I've had bariatric surgery. That didn't work. I've regained my weight. What now? So with intermittent fasting, and it's just, like I said, this is the easiest thing I've ever done compared to any diet, because it's all about the window. It's all about, okay, you have a 5-hour window to eat. And in that 5-hour window, you eat whatever the F you want. In that 5-hour window, you don't have to count calories. You don't have to count carbs. You don't have to count protein. So talk a little bit about your eating styles. Like, what sort of things have changed in the way you used to eat compared to the way you do now?
So many things have changed. And when I was struggling all those years with dieting and yo-yoing and trying everything up and down, I literally would try everything. I'm sure that you did too. I would I would go to the bookstore and go to the diet aisle and see what new books I hadn't seen before, and I'd pick them up and I'd look at them, or I'd go to Amazon to the weight loss category and I'd look at the top 10. What's new? What have I not tried yet? And I would read the reviews, and I was always on the hunt for something, and I thought I thought it would come down to like magic food. The magic food that would make me lose weight. I actually had great success on the low fat diets of the early 90s, but I wasn't eating, whole food, real food. I did the snack wells and all that, snack wells and spaghettios. That was literally what I would eat. I got really, really thin. I was skinnier than I am now. But I was not healthy. I was not nourished well because I was eating low fat junk. But I never tried that again, which is interesting. But over the years from the 90s on, I would try, this diet or that diet. And I would always come back to low carb, like Atkins had such a big pull for me because we were doing Atkins did you try Atkins? I'm sure you probably did.
Oh yeah. Oh God.
Over the years, I bought multiple
my
copies
whole
of the
family,
Atkins books.
Yeah, my mom and my sister and I did Atkins when I was in high school still. So I was like 16 or 17. I weighed 250 pounds, and we actually named this bread Derb, and it was a special kind of product that was kind of similar to bread, but it was from the Dr. Atkins recipe book. And the thing about the Dr. Atkins diet is I got really, really sick on that diet.
I never lost any weight. That's the part that was hilarious. I liked any diet that told me I could eat as much as I want of whatever it was. That was low fat. I never wanted to try that again, I guess, even though it worked beautifully. I didn't want to eat snack wells and spaghettios again, whatever. But with Atkins, I would immediately lose like 4 pounds. Now I understand why.
Sorry, that's my dog barking.
It's all right. You could get a cat in here in any moment. But I would lose 4 pounds. Now I understand that was depleted glycogen, right? When we have glycogen from the carbs that we eat stored in our liver and stored in our muscles, it comes along with water weight. So I would lose those 4 pounds of water weight, and I would be highly motivated at the beginning. Then I would never lose another pound. And then I started to feel worse. And then I would end up at an event and eat some carbs and whatever. And then I would be back up those 4 pounds the very next day. So I was like, well, this doesn't work. Low carb never once worked for me, but I kept cycling through it. And also the Suzanne Summers plan. Did you ever try the Suzanne Summers plan?
No, but I heard of it.
Summer sizing. She would have you eat, it's just like you could eat as much as you want as long as you keep your fats and your carbs separate. So you could have the low carb meal, or you could have the low fat meal, whatever. But I always ended up gravitating to the low carb again, but again, never lost any weight. So eventually I just gave it all up. And I'm like, well, clearly the answer isn't any kind of magical food. So I'm just going to eat whatever the F I want, right? And forget it. And so those were the years that I yo-yoed more and more. And in between there, I tried diet pills and HCG, and I did all of that stuff. And for a while with the diet pills, I actually was able to maintain a kind of low weight as long as I kept taking them. But I felt so bad. And you could get them from the doctor, right? So they seemed like they were good. But eventually I was like, forget it. I feel so terrible. This can't be good for me. And I regained all that weight plus more. And my weight kept going up and up and up. So when I started dabbling in intermittent fasting from 2009 to 2014, those were my dabble years, I didn't want to change what I was eating. I would just try it here and there. I never got fat adapted though, because no one explained what that was. I don't even know if people understood it. Because again, intermittent fasting was just to eat fewer calories. So that's all we thought that it was doing. So I never could stick because I never got fat adapted. And it wasn't until 2014 when I finally decided, okay, this is it. I'm going to do it. And I never quit. And the funny part of that is, it was the fall of 2014, and I had been trying keto one more time. Now we were calling it keto instead of, Atkins. And I did keto the entire summer of 2014, and I lost 0 pounds from the keto.
And it would be really, terrible. Really hard on your heart health.
I felt terrible. I never felt satisfied. I was really puffy. I felt inflamed. Yeah. And so then, but here's the thing though, it was when people were talking about ketones, and there was a ketone breath meter called Ketonics. You had to plug it into the wall. It wasn't battery operated. You plugged it in and let it do something, and then you blew into it. So I was blowing heavy ketones from doing the keto diet. But the problem is all the ketones my body was making was from the fat I was eating, right? So I was in deep ketosis and burning all the fat I was eating. And it was enough so I didn't lose any weight. And, I would change my macros up. But then I was like, you know what? Forget it. I just can't. I hate this way of eating. I don't feel good. I'm not losing weight. Why am I doing it? So then I went back to intermittent fasting for one last time, 5-hour daily eating window, based on Dr. Burt Herring's work. The Fast Five diet is what he called it. And the difference was I was already fat adapted because I'd been doing keto the whole summer. So suddenly I was able to do it a little bit better. I wasn't fasting clean yet, as I mentioned, so I was still kind of white knuckling it, but I started losing weight. I went back, I added all the carbs back in. I was eating the way, the foods, the standard American diet. I was going through drive-throughs. I was getting convenience food, but I was weighing daily, and I started calculating my weekly average once a week, and I was losing about 1 pound a week. And I'd added all the foods back in, and I'm like, I can do this. So I did that until spring was coming, spring of 2015, and I wanted to get down to my goal weight faster. And at that point, I was in some Facebook groups. One of them was Dr. Burt Herring's Facebook group. And someone in that book or in that group mentioned a book called The Science of Skinny. And I'm like, hadn't read that. So I got that book, The Science of Skinny, and she talked about processed foods. That was before we had the terminology ultra processed, because I don't think that terminology had really been invented yet. And so we were just saying processed foods, but she was like, eat real foods. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put together what she's doing with the Science of Skinny with this intermittent fasting that I'm doing in my 5-hour window, and I'm going to see what happens. My weight loss picked up. I was losing about 2 pounds a week eating real food. And again, this was 2015, so I was younger. It was prior to menopause, whatever. I'd revved up my metabolism through all the years of I don't care anymore. So I was doing fine, but I got down to my goal weight eating real food. Again, though, I was still on the diet mentality at that point, and it was 2015. So I started eating all the foods again, but I never forgot what I learned about processed foods, which we now call ultra processed foods. Then when I read the obesity code in 2016, what's so funny is Jason Fung is so well known in the low carb and the keto community. But when you read the obesity code, if you just read it through the filter of, not with a preconceived notion that Jason Fung equals low carb, if you just read the obesity code, it's real food is what it is. It's eat real food.
Eat real food, yeah.
Eat real food, add some intermittent fasting, eat real food. And so that just kind of, when I read that in 2016, that kind of reinforced to me that the more real food we eat, the better. And so over time, I just added more real food. In 2017, when I wrote the book, Feast Without Fear, by that point, I had Facebook groups, and people were like, it was like the diet wars. If you know anything about 2017, that was when intermittent fasting plus keto was really taking off. And people would come in and they're like, if you're not eating keto, you're wasting your time. And I'd be like, well, I don't eat keto. I eat carbs. I have potatoes. I eat, whatever. But people would just argue with you. They'd say, you can't get into ketosis. Now, remember, I had my little breath analyzer, and I was still getting into ketosis. I could measure it. During my fast, I was getting into ketosis, and then I was having like a burger or whatever in my window. So I knew that your body could, I didn't understand what was going on at that point, but I was like, we gotta really just solve the diet wars once and for all. So I started researching, and that led me to the blue zones. This was 2017, the work on the blue zones, and then also the gut microbiome. People were just starting to talk about the gut microbiome then. And I made the connection in Feast Without Fear that the diet that they ate in the blue zones was also the diet that's going to really nourish your gut microbiome well. So maybe we need to eat more fibrous foods, more vegetable foods, eat real food like they're eating in the blue zones. And so that sent me down the path of bio-individuality and how we're all going to be different, which is why somebody might love low carb keto, feel amazing. They've never felt better in their life. They have great results. They never want to stop eating that way. That's what works really well for their body, whereas it didn't work really well for me. So ever since then, I've really been on the journey of figuring out what makes me feel my best, I've realized too much fat is inflammatory for my body. I went through something called the Zoe testing, which is Tim Spector. He's a gut researcher out of the UK who now works on personalized nutrition through all sorts of different testing. They test your gut, they test your blood sugar response, they test how your body clears fat. My body doesn't clear fat well. That's what Zoe showed me through this testing. I'm like, well, now it makes sense why I did so well on those low fat diets, even though I was eating junk. My body does better with less fat. And so I can understand, if I want to be less puffy, maybe I don't use as much butter and cream. That doesn't mean I'm never going to have butter and cream. I have it all the time, but I just need to be a little more mindful.
And
Understanding myself.
Yeah, and mindfulness, that's the key word.
Right.
I didn't want to interrupt you because I had a question about.
Okay.
Now I've forgotten the word.
Oh gosh, sorry.
When you become fat.
Fat adapted. Yeah.
That's what. Can you explain to our listeners
Yes.
a little bit more about what is fat adapted? Because I don't know if I'm in the fat adapted zone yet. I mean, I've been doing it now for 48 days, but what is that exactly?
Well, let me ask you how you're feeling right now. It's almost 2:30. You haven't opened your window yet. Are you feeling sharp mentally?
Yes. Yeah. Sharp.
You are fat adapted. And if you had to keep, that's how I know. If you had to keep fasting for another hour, you could.
Yes.
You're fat adapted. Okay, so let's explain what that is. Basically, we are all born metabolically flexible. The day we're born, metabolically flexible, our bodies are designed to shift fuel sources depending on what's available. Think about, 1,000 years ago when there wasn't a grocery store you could go to and you had to go out and kill it yourself or find it, right? If our bodies shut down when we didn't have food coming in every hour, we wouldn't have been able to hunt and gather and our species would have died. So we have to be able to survive a famine. We have to be able to be mentally sharp and hunt and gather and have energy and do all that. But here we are in the modern world, right? Where you start off as a child being told to clean your plate. It's breakfast time. You will eat. Now it's snack time. Here's your snack. You must eat this. Now it's lunch. You must eat this. And so you're taught from a young age to eat at meal times, at snack times, and to clear your plate. So you're no longer listening to your body, but you're also no longer needing to be metabolically flexible. So we get on what I like to call the blood sugar roller coaster, where you're constantly fueling yourself with what you're putting in your mouth. So think about a typical low-calorie diet. Maybe you're going to eat 1,200 calories because that's what your low-calorie diet recommends. So you get up and you have your fat-free creamer with your 0-calorie sweetener and your latte, and it's no fat, no sugar, and you're drinking that, and you're having your little tiny 100-calorie cereal bar, right? So now you've had a little bit, and then mid-morning comes and you're having your little tiny low-calorie snack. Then you're going to have your lean cuisine for lunch. But all day long, you're putting fuel in, not enough to make your body really satisfied, not enough to run your body because we need more than 1,200 calories to run our body, but just enough to keep our insulin high so that we're not able to tap into our fat stores very well.
No.
Because our insulin's high. So you're getting hangrier and hangrier, but you're on that blood sugar roller coaster. Every time you have a crash, you're starving, you're hangry. And so you're just barely making it. Eventually, you get to the point where you can't do it anymore, and that's when you have the binge or whatever it is, and the diet's over, and you feel like a failure. But really, it was because you were never tapping into your stored fuel. We've got stored fuel right now. I do, you do, everybody listening does. We all have stored fat. Even if you're a very lean athlete, you still have thousands of calories of stored fat. Plus, you have glycogen stored in your liver, glycogen stored in your muscles. All that can fuel you. And so when you learn how to fast and you become fat adapted, you're fasting clean, your insulin goes down. Eventually, your body's like, well, there's nothing coming in. I've used up the liver glycogen. I've got, some glycogen stored in my muscle, but I need something now. And your body's like, hello, could you send something down? I'm hungry. And you're like, no, I am fasting. There's plenty of fuel stored in my fat stores. Get that. And then your body is finally like, okay, all right, it's a lot more work for me to get this fat out that I put away for later, but now you're not sending anything in. I'm going to do it. So your body finally has built up those fat burning enzymes again. Your body's able to get to that fat. And suddenly your body realizes, oh, we're fine. Okay, thank you. And then your body flips that metabolic switch and you're ready to burn that fat. I first learned about that it might have been about around 2017, and it really cleared up a lot for me. It was when Dr. Mark Mattson put out a research journal article called Flipping the Metabolic Switch, and it was understanding fasting. And that article, if anybody wants to Google it, just Google Flipping the Metabolic Switch, Mark Mattson, and you'll be able to find it. And you should be able to read the full text version somewhere. You might want to use the word PubMed in your search as well, because that'll take you straight to the article. But our bodies are meant to be metabolically flexible. We're not meant to have to put in sugar every hour.
And it's, again, there's several external environmental things that are affecting us.
Right.
And the biggest driving machine, because I experienced it when I came back to Toronto after being away for 20 years and living in Amsterdam in a more whole food environment, is the amount of commercials about junk food, about highly processed food. And in every sense of the word, you are constantly being reminded. You look out the window. I look out the window here. I'm in downtown Toronto. I'm surrounded in hundreds and hundreds of restaurants and fast food places.
Yeah.
You know, I can smell it just walking down the street. But oh God, I lost my train of thought already. But the thing is about the fact that you're seeing people constantly drinking with Starbucks coffees or really sugary drinks. We have a franchise here now. It's in America as well called Tim Hortons.
I knew you were going to say Tim Horton. Yeah.
So you go to Tim Hortons for a Timmy. You go to Timmy's. They're called Timmy's.
Timbits.
And you get some Timbits, you get some donuts, or you get a double or whatever. Yep. Double means 2 creams, 2 sugars. But you're constantly seeing people drinking a lot of sugary drinks. And now what's really, really popular, there's a very large Asian community here in Toronto. They're all drinking this bubble tea stuff. And that's packed with sugar. And then you have this matcha tea thing, and that's all, again, lots of sugar stuff.
And this is why everybody has fatty liver, and we're getting it in our teenagers now. Our kids are coming with fatty liver.
Yeah.
Because it all gets into your liver, and then it becomes, converted to fat. Yeah. And then that gives you, when your liver is packed with fat, you're just really going to be metabolically unhealthy.
Well, unfortunately, very sad. My mother died of fatty liver disease.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She was obese all her life, and it took her life. And that was one of the big red flags for me when I decided to take the leap and do bariatric surgery, because I didn't want to die like my mother died of fatty liver disease. Because her kidneys and liver shut down because of the amount of fat she's been eating all her life.
Yep.
And what I was going to say, and now I forgot the train of thought once again, is that now I know. The giant multi-trillion-dollar pharmaceutical world and food world, the Kellogg's, the big giant companies, cannot make any money off of fasting.
Right.
They cannot make a dime off fasting. You watch CNN, every commercial break is about Wegovy.
Oh, I know.
And so I was so furious and so upset, and I wanted to write an email to our local television channel called CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting System, during the Olympics. Every single commercial was about Ozempic. So while you're watching these really fit athletes in Paris, because I love the Olympics, there's a commercial break, and the commercial break is about Ozempic, reminding you, yes, it's great you're sitting on the couch and you're probably snacking watching these athletes, but you should buy some Wegovy at $1,000 a week to help you lose weight. And so if you're watching TV, if you're watching a movie, everything is always advertising some sort of product.
Right.
And I'm getting to my point. There is no product that anybody, any company can make money off with fasting.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is that I've in my last fasting journey, for example, I talked about it in my last podcast with Allison Pisani. We just reviewed the book Atomic Habits.
Great book. He's an intermittent faster, by the way. Did you know that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is that the intermittent fasting world almost seems invisible or secretive. It's like the secret Harry Potter community because people don't talk about it in their day-to-day conversations. It's not something like, oh, I'm doing the Weight Watchers diet, or I'm doing this diet or that diet. Nobody really talks about intermittent fasting. And so I'm always surprised when I talk, because I'm a chatty catty, I talk to random strangers or cashiers, my new physiotherapist for all my neck and back issues. I find out they're doing intermittent fasting, but it's not something that is shared really. Unless you're an intermittent faster and you're looking into a community like the DDD community that I've joined, that you can talk. I love you to talk about as well. But with Facebook, and then looking up all of these, because I looked up all of these bariatric Facebook groups, but I didn't really discover very much with the connection between bariatric and intermittent fasting, and that's how I discovered Allison. But can you explain a little bit more about your experience of how the intermittent fasting is blowing up, and it's just like a huge, huge secretive community, because it's not really, nobody can make any money off of it. So
well, that's what's so funny. And people try, they're like selling fasting bars or fasting supplements or fasting whatever. And I would like to tell everybody, if you needed to buy something for fasting, I would create it and I would sell it to you and I would make millions of dollars because I have a large platform. The fact that I have not made a fasting product to sell you means that you don't need one. So do not buy anybody's fasting product. It is a scam.
Buy her book, but don't buy any product.
You can get the book. If you've got a library card, you can get the ebook for free through your library. Yeah. If you have Audible, you can get the books on Audible for your credits. So you don't have to spend a dime to do intermittent fasting, but there is no product that you need. So, people always will come in the community. They're like, I saw this, it's fasting electrolytes. And I'm like, just regular, like I'm drinking my San Pellegrino mineral water. You don't need to spend a lot of money on stuff, or my fasting, whatever. You don't need all that. Fasting is free. So ignore all the push to sell you things. You don't need it, I promise. Not only is fasting free, but you're going to buy fewer things. You don't need the cream. You don't need the creamer. You don't need the whatever. Just eat food in your window. That's it. And as far as why people don't know about it, I think people are afraid to maybe say it because they think that it's weird. But I'm going to tell you, I've been in the fasting world since 2014. Well, really 2009 when I started reading about it, but it was weird.
Good 10
years. It was weird back then. It was weird back then, I will tell you. It was weird in 2009. It was weird in 2014 and 2015. Here's when it stopped being weird, 2016. Because 2016 is the year that the Nobel Prize in Medicine came out for the research on autophagy.
I love that word. It's such a great word. Autophagy.
It is. I love it.
Autophagy. It's a musical word. That's why I like it.
It is a great word. But suddenly, people are like, wait a minute. It's not just because you're eating fewer calories. Oh, we're having autophagy. What's that? And then the obesity code came out that same year. And then people are like, oh, what? Insulin? You're keeping your insulin down? Oh, it's more than calories in, calories out. And that's when the shift kind of started. And then, Dr. Mark Mattson had a paper. I've already mentioned his Flipping the Metabolic Switch paper. But then at the very end of 2019, I believe it was December 26th of 2019, he had a journal article come out in the New England Journal of Medicine about intermittent fasting. And he made the circuit of all the morning talk shows. And it was so cool. Right after that moment, we had people joining our Facebook groups, which I no longer have, so nobody look for them. We don't have them anymore. But people had to answer the questions, why do you want to do intermittent fasting? Prior to Mark Mattson putting that article out, on December 26th of 2019, it was always, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. But all of a sudden, we had a bunch of people who said, for the health benefits, for the health benefits, because he focused on the health benefits. He actually wrote that article because he knew a lot about intermittent fasting. He researched it. He lives as an intermittent faster and has since the 1980s, by the way. And he does not do it for weight loss. He does it. He's in neurological research. He does it for brain health. But he was well known. He had written that Flipping the Metabolic Switch journal article. And a lot of doctors had started hearing that their patients were doing intermittent fasting. So the doctors didn't know anything about it. So they would ask, how do I learn more about it? The doctors didn't know. So the New England Journal of Medicine asked him to write that review article about intermittent fasting for the doctors to learn about it. And so I think that for anybody who's listening, like I know, Wendy, it just came into your orbit, right? And now it's like you're seeing it, and that's around you. There are a lot of people, it just hasn't come into their orbit yet. But if you're doing intermittent fasting, I don't want you to be afraid to mention it, because there's a chance your doctor is an intermittent faster.
Well,
there's
yeah,
a chance.
my own nutritionist, she's an intermittent faster.
Right.
I went to my diabetic nutritionist because I wanted to talk to her about my protein intake and whatever as a bariatric patient.
Right.
And she says, "Well, I practice it. I'm an IFer," and I'm just like, I'm discovering this whole world of people that are IFers, intermittent fasters, IFers, and that it's like, what? So,
I really think there's two kinds of people. There's people who are not intermittent fasters because they don't understand how amazing it is to live that way and how healthy it is, and the intermittent fasters. That's it. I really think the people who are not doing it, they either don't know about it or they haven't done it the clean, fast way. Because I guarantee you, if I had not discovered the clean fast along the way, I probably would have quit at some point, because it would have gotten too hard and I would have gained all my weight back and I would have said intermittent fasting didn't work.
Well,
so thank God for Jason Fung.
Yeah, it's probably why at the beginning, when I was doing the Jason Fung intermittent fasting method, that I actually was really struggling, and I was hungry and I felt sick to my stomach, and it was just like, oh my God, this is really, really hard. I'm not afraid of doing hard stuff because that's who I am. I'm one of those, and you quote that many times in your book, are you the type of person that rips off the Band-Aid and just does it? Yeah. I'm that type of person. I'll rip off the Band-Aid and do it. Hell, I'll start a podcast about intermittent fasting for the bariatric community, because for me, I'm also an educator. I'm also a teacher. And my goal in life, and that is Allison's goal as well, is to help all of these bariatric patients that are throughout North America who have all experienced weight regain.
Right.
Most of the VSG community, not so much the bypass, but the VSG, they have all experienced weight regain, and they're pulling the hairs out of their head like, oh my God, do I have to go back to dieting? So this, like, my goal, and I share my podcast with my whole Toronto bariatric community, and people are still not, I don't want to know about this. I don't know. I'm fine. I'm fine. They're very, very, what's the word? Trepidatious. They're just like, no, I'm not there yet.
Even when I share a quote with you that I think is really powerful? And I did not make this quote up. I heard it. I can't remember the origin of it. I don't know where I heard it even, but it stuck with me. And the quote is, dieting is easy in contemplation and hard in execution, whereas fasting is hard in contemplation but easy in execution. So if I totally understand all the weary dieters out there, and you don't get to the bariatric surgery world without being a very weary dieter, right? I guarantee if I had not found fasting, I would have continued to gain weight. And there was the part of me that wished I was big enough to be on the Biggest Loser show or be big enough for bariatric surgery, because I thought that was just the next step. So thank goodness I found intermittent fasting when I did, but I get it. But we can do hard things. You've done hard things. So anybody who's listening, if you think intermittent fasting is the hardest thing you've ever done, it's actually easier than those low-calorie diets when you were white-knuckling it and not tapping into your fat. Because once your body sees all that stored fuel, that's why it's there. Our bodies are not so stupid as to store 300 excess pounds of fat and not be able to get to it.
No.
But our dietary advice is so stupid that says eat small meals every 2 hours. That'll help you lose weight. No, that's not how bodies work. People who were needing to access their stored fat had literally nothing coming in, back in the day before convenience foods and diet foods in the modern era. Your body had to be able to flip that switch so you wouldn't die. So that fuel that's stored on your body is accessible.
Yeah, I always give the bear hibernating prophet. Talk about the story about a bear that hibernates. He eats the whole summer, and then he goes into hibernation, and he's alive and is fine and breathing and working, but he's burning the fat that's stored.
Right, that's why it's there.
It's right there. Now, the thing I was going to mention is that talking about mainstream, because we hear about things through mainstream television, like talk shows, Oprah. We discovered all of Oprah's and followed along with all of Oprah's weight struggles.
We did.
And then she got to the point where she owned part of Weight Watchers, and then she dropped Weight Watchers like a stone when she discovered how easy it was to just keep on taking Ozempic. And so I am waiting for the day when you, Jen, are invited to go on Drew Barrymore or any of the talk shows, because Oprah's not around anymore, to make fasting mainstream.
Well, let me tell you something about this. This is interesting. I was at a dinner in New York in March of this year, 2024, and I was a couple of seats away from someone whose name you would recognize, who is a weight loss correspondent for one of the main morning shows. I'm just going to say it like that because I don't want you to know who it was. And I was talking about intermittent fasting with her, and she said, we don't really like to do weight loss segments anymore because that's kind of out of vogue. And so that made me really sad because they can only do health segments now. So, if we would have to talk about intermittent fasting as a health approach, because apparently you're not supposed to, whatever. We're not going to talk about weight loss on those shows anymore. And that made me sad.
Yeah. Well,
every commercial break will be about weight loss drugs. That's okay.
And again, back to the original.
Make it make sense.
Original argument is that you'll only be invited to mainstream television interviews if it's okay with the commercial supporters. So if this program, all of the programs that we see on TV are generated because of support from some sort of company that is wanting to put commercials on this show. So
that's
ABC, true. CBS, or NBC, or CNN, or any of these shows. Look how many Wegovy commercials there are on CNN now. That
maybe that's actually why they don't put weight loss on there anymore, and she couldn't tell me that.
Yeah, but
that's
it's
probably actually why.
Yeah, So that's why. The mainstream the mainstream people, like the baby boomers, like me, we're the only ones that have cable, really. The young people don't have cable. They do everything with streaming.
Yeah,
they do everything with streaming. How old are you, by the way?
I'm 55.
Okay, so I say 55 and younger. It's all streaming or YouTube, but it's not cable. Because I watch cable, I watch CNN, I watch ABC or whatever, but the cable television programs are supported very much like with commercials. Like look at the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, they're selling 2-minute commercials for over $10 or $12 million per minute.
Wow.
And then so that's how they're making their big money. And I'm losing my thread here. But
well, you're right. That's why it's not going to be on the mainstream.
It's not mainstream.
It's not going to be.
And if you're a book reader or you happen to be in an office and you're talking at the water cooler talk and you're talking about, I practice intermittent fasting, that's not happening either. It's not.
So I think it is. And I think it's happening quietly. And it's like people got real interested in my life after I lost the weight and they could see that I was keeping it off. They'd seen me lose weight before. They'd never seen me keep it off. So suddenly I lost the weight and I was keeping it off and I was healthier and I had more energy. And then people are like, what are you doing? And that's when the conversation begins, when they can see the change in you. And do you remember that commercial? Did y'all have that in Canada? The was it Fabergé Organics, what it was like? And then it was a shampoo. And then you're like, and then she told 2 friends and then she told 2 friends. Do you remember that one?
I probably back
That
in
was, it was
it
all
rings a
about
bell.
word of
Yeah,
mouth, and
word of
that's
mouth.
how intermittent fasting is changing the world. Where people tell a friend, they tell someone they love, they share it. In Fast Feast Repeat, there's a chapter in there called Share Without Fear, and I named it that on purpose because you might be fearful to share because you might think people are going to say, oh, you're starving yourself, or that's not good for you, or breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And people will say all of that to you.
Yep, they
But
have said that to me.
well, you've planted a seed though. And so they might think you're crazy today, but when they continue to watch you and they see how you're doing, then they're gonna be like, what was that thing you were telling me about? I might want to read a little more about it.
Well,
And
so again, so I'm the pioneer too, because when I'm talking about the Canadian bariatric community or the Toronto bariatric community, remember Toronto is the third largest city in all of North America, over 10 million people.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, third largest in North America. It's New York, L.A., Toronto, Chicago,
Wow.
and so I know that I'm a pioneer. I have maybe 2 or 3 years from now, when people are seeing that I am losing the weight and have kept the weight off and not struggling with weight regain, that they see, oh, because I have 4 friends that had done bariatric surgery because of the success they saw me, because
Right.
I had my Finding Wendy YouTube channel right from day one of my bariatric surgery back in 2018. So I have been a pioneer with showing the bariatric surgery. But and then during the pandemic, I stopped doing these videos because I started regaining the weight. And
Right.
that's when a lot of, like, there's a whole bariatric YouTube community, but they would stop posting videos when they started regaining weight.
Well,
And
that's why they
so,
never had a Biggest Loser reunion, right?
right. So we all know the Biggest Loser story. So
Yeah.
then I came back because I thought, no, I'm a fighter. I have to win that horn audition. I have to win that job in an orchestra. That's how I'm trained. I'm a very competitive person. And I thought, no, this is not going to beat me down. Again, I'm not going to start regaining the weight. There's got to be another way.
Right.
And I don't want to die like my mom died. And
Mhm.
so it's just like this intermittent fasting, and I can't say it loud enough or strong enough, but there's still people out there like, no, 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 I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. But you're the pioneer. You're showing that it does work. And then I'm 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now,
Right.
we'll be doing that. And with the help of other products and books or communities, I call it the tribe, when you're
Yep.
reading Atomic Habits and you're learning about habits and learning about your tribe, and that you have a group of people that you're sharing and enjoying this journey with. It's
Right.
really important to share
Yeah.
this journey or this lifestyle with other people that are doing the same lifestyle, because then you can compare it and you relate to people, right?
Yep.
I can't, like, when I'm talking about classical music and somebody says, what's a French horn? That's hard for me sometimes, because it's like, what is that? Well, it's a circular thing with a bell and you put your hand in it. Oh, the trumpet. No.
No.
So
My son was a trombone player, so I'm very partial to the brass section.
very good. That's great. That's great. And then everybody has played some sort of musical instrument, and maybe 10 years from now, everybody will be practicing intermittent
I
fasting
hope so.
to,
And I think the key is to spread the clean fast because, again, like I said, if I had not come across the ideas in the obesity code and then, converted those into the idea of the clean fast, I'm pretty much sure I wouldn't have been able to continue to white knuckle it for over 10 years and
yeah.
stick with it. It was really, really hard. And like I said, I'd already started to regain weight because I was basically low calorie dieting. I wasn't fasting clean. So once I started fasting clean, I lost 2 more jean sizes. It became easy. So I want to spread the word of the clean fast so that we're not even debating it anymore. We just are, if you're fasting clean because that's how you're going to have the metabolic benefits. That's how you're going to feel better. Take the clean fast challenge. And that's my role in all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Sharing
just,
that.
And we're gonna be we're coming close now to the end of this. And the one thing I just wanted to mention to people is the flexibility of
Yeah.
intermittent fasting. So you were talking in a recent podcast, and I can't remember which it was, a more recent one where you or your co-host was talking about a vacation, coming back
Yep.
from a vacation.
Florida. I'd been to Florida.
Yeah, you were in Florida, and I hope the people in Florida are okay. But you were in Florida, and that you had very long windows of eating. And when you came back from Florida, it was this morning. When you came back from Florida, you had to really get back into that smaller eating window.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that just quickly? Because what the thing is that life gets in the way. Like right now, I have a friend visiting from Mexico, and my eating windows have been longer since he's here because we end up getting dinner quite late and finishing
That's
quite
what happened
late.
to me.
Yeah.
Even if I waited until 2 to open my window, like I might open at 2 at home, but I close by 7 on a normal day. 2 to 7 is a great window for me. Today it's going to be later because it's 3 now and I haven't eaten yet. So I'll open at some point. But in Florida, even if I waited until 2 to open and had a little something, by the time we went out to dinner and had dinners like 9, 10 o'clock, because things were just later. And so there was nothing for my window to stretch to be 8 hours. And I was also eating restaurant food every day. I traveled. I was there for 8 nights plus, the travel days. So it was a total of 9 days of traveling and, eating out. I basically ate out for 9 days. And so I definitely refilled my liver glycogen and, you don't lose metabolic flexibility, but I was definitely not shifting into ketosis during the day ever. I never had the good mental clarity. I was like taking naps on the pool chair. And then when I got home, I had to get through that liver glycogen again so that I could feel my best. It took a few days and I didn't do anything dramatic. Like I didn't fast for a long period of time. I just got right back to my normal routine of my daily 5-hour window. And I was a little lethargic and draggy. But after a few days, back to my normal routine, bam, I felt like myself again. And I didn't beat myself up. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't have to do diet penance or anything like that. I was just like, man, next time I go to Florida for a week, I'm going to try to open it later because that just made me, I just don't like feeling that way. And so that's why I know I'll be an intermittent faster for the rest of my life, because did I enjoy being a little more relaxed? Yes, but also no, really. In hindsight, I didn't feel my best. So.
Well, and that again, to say I am going to be an intermittent faster for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It's something that we didn't say when we were doing the diets. I am going to be in Weight Watchers the rest of my life. I am going to do Atkins the rest of my life. And these people that are now going to be doing Ozempic or Wegovy the rest of their life, that it's so new. You don't know what.
Yeah, I really have a feeling. Do you remember Fin and how that turned out?
I do listen to Aubrey Gordon's podcast, who talks about all of the diets and all of the horrible, horrible things that happen to you when you follow this diet or that diet. But there's nothing horrible about intermittent fasting that will affect you. And, and what I was going to say, and to end this, and I think I could talk to you forever, Jen.
I know.
It's just like the both of us are like blah, 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 blah. Blabber addicts here, verbal diarrhea, whatever you want to call it. The really interesting and really easy part is that if you do fall off the wagon, say you're on vacation, say you have a friend coming over, whatever, all you do the next morning is just say, I'm not going to have anything to eat until
I'm fasting.
I'm fasting. You don't have to have a special ingredients in your house in the cupboard, or I have to have low fat this or low fat that, or low sugar this or low sugar that. You just say, windows closed. I can't eat. I'm going to fast until 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. And then I can eat whatever the F I want. And it's so easy. And it's like, and I talk about that with, and Allison mentions that too in the podcast, where she has cravings for something, and then she writes it down on a Post-it, and then she has a wall of Post-it saying, "Oh, I'll have it the next day during my window. I can eat that particular thing I found she wanted." I don't know. Like, let's say it's pumpkin spice season. If you
Right.
really, really want pumpkin spice ice cream, or you want pumpkin pie, or you want something that you had a craving for at 8 o'clock at night when your fasting window's closed, and then you see a commercial for this delicious whatever on TV, and then you write it down in your journal, write it down on a Post-it note. My next fasting window, I am going to eat that, and you can.
You
And
can. That's the delay in action. That the delay, don't deny.
Yeah.
But the funny thing that happens is, and I'm pretty sure Allison probably said this, let me guess, it comes along and you really don't want it.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
That's
It's on the sticky note. You're like, I could have that, but I'd really rather have some cottage cheese with frozen cherries. That's my latest thing. I'm on a kick for that.
Ah, cool. Yeah,
It's so good. Yeah.
Well, it's been so great talking to you. We winged this, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
There's no script, there's no nothing, but the two of us are so professional talkers, so to speak, that it's possible to do. But
we did it.
I really hope that for all of you listeners who have never ever heard anything about intermittent fasting or thought, what the heck is Wendy talking about now? But it's just, check it out. That's all I can say. It's just go with an open mind and rip off the Band-Aid and just try it. And again, you can just try simple thing like stop eating at 7 p.m. after you've had dinner. Don't eat anything more. Close that window. Shut it. Close it down. Do not have a glass of wine with some chips or whatever. Just close the window at 7 o'clock and don't eat again till the next morning at 7 o'clock. Yeah. Then you fasted for 12 hours during your sleep. And if you have an issue with eating while you're watching TV, watch TV in a different place, maybe not particularly on your couch, or just don't watch TV at night, but only watch your program during your dinner time or something like that. And so to change up that habit, because I remember, oh God, I remember talking to, I don't know who I talked to about, but the association with feeling endorphins.
Right.
You feel safe when you're on the couch watching TV. If you had some sort of traumatic issue growing up as a kid, you always felt safe when you were sitting and watching TV. And that association with eating and sitting, it gives you endorphins and makes you feel good. So finding another way to get those endorphins instead of sitting and watching TV, until you can sit and watch TV while you become a longtime intermittent faster, and that you don't eat while you're watching TV anymore, because that's the number one thing. And that's what happened to me when I started regaining weight, that I started eating at night, watching TV. During the day, I was fine.
You could just say, set a personal standard for yourself. I do not eat while I'm watching TV. Just making that one shift. I do not eat while I'm watching TV. And you just follow that rule forever.
Exactly.
And then you eat at the table. You do not eat when you're watching TV. And start, rewiring those pathways in your brain. And, from the book Atomic Habits, you just keep doing it. This is your new habit. And for anything, you have to start somewhere and you have to change. Like, I don't like to floss my teeth. Guess what? I don't like to do it. I don't know why, but I now do habit stacking. I've got my dental floss right there. So before I blow dry my hair, I floss my teeth every morning. It's just what I do now. And I don't have to talk myself into it. It's just habit stack. I do it. But so you can make new habits around your food as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is never too late to make a change. And that's the thing I really want everyone to understand. We've got people in our community of all ages, but we have had people 70s, 80s who are new to intermittent fasting and starting. We've got a mother-daughter team who are both pretty new right now. And the mother's older and her daughter introduced her to it. Now they're doing it together. They read Delayed on Tonight together out loud. Yeah. And they're doing it together, and they're both in the community. And so it's never too late. And
No.
you don't want to feel alone. And that's why, we have our community. You can listen to my podcasts, intermittent fasting stories. Will let you know that you are not alone.
Yeah.
I've recorded 440 something episodes now.
Wow.
And in every one of them, there's something about that story that you will connect with.
Mm-hmm.
And you will also take something away from the guest, and know that you're not alone. You're not the only weirdo doing intermittent fasting. And hey, it's not even weird. And, scientists and doctors, once they learn about it, they start doing it. And once they start doing it, they don't stop doing it. So,
yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Well, it's been great talking to you, Jen.
well,
And
thank you.
and thank you so much for coming today on the Finding Wendy podcast. And I'm hoping that a lot of listeners will enjoy this, and we'll be sharing it everywhere and anywhere and everybody's platforms. And that there's probably something there that you'll recognize in yourself, and you'll think,
Yep.
well, yeah, actually, why can't I do this?
You
And
can.
that's exactly right. So anyways, thanks again. And we'll see who the next guest will be, but I think it's exciting. I'm excited about, and you're excited, and you're really excited in sharing it with the community.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not making any money doing this. I'm just doing
Right.
it because I'm passionate about sharing. Like as a musician, I share great pieces of music with people. And I say, you got to listen to that symphony if you really like this sort of thing. But because health it's so central to and so important
yeah.
to us now, especially now with, I mean, you have the American election coming up. You have so many people that are so ill and
Right.
have to sell their houses because they can't afford to go into a hospital. Thank God I live in a country where we have healthcare that is covered by our government. But I can imagine that there are a lot of people out there that don't have a big income and can't afford to do or work on their health. But guess what? You
But
can.
fasting is free.
Fasting
And so
is
that's the
free,
thing.
and that's what's so
It's
great
free.
about it. You don't have to have all these expensive things to do it.
And it'll save
And-
you money because you're
and
going
it-
to eat just between whatever your hours
That's
are.
right.
2 and
It's
7 or
actually
whatever.
cheaper. It's very, very cheap.
And then you
so-
will not have the health bills, because I haven't been to the doctor for a sick visit since, I guess, 2016. So
Yeah. So there's just so many benefits to intermittent fasting on your
Yeah.
wallet as well, and especially in a place like America where they do not have like a proper national healthcare system like they do in most countries around the world. But it's just I don't know. I'm excited. You're excited. I keep on meeting exciting people, part of the
Yeah.
tribe. And that we eventually, you and I, or especially you, will be on national television, telling the whole world, do intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
and just forget about the rest.
or even just tell 2 people. Once you're
Yeah.
doing it, just tell 2 people, and the ripple effect and the
And
grassroots.
we'll see what the ripple effect is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, and we I'm going to hit the stop record button right now, and then we will see you next time, and I'll be following you on your podcasts, and then maybe
I'll see you in the community.
we'll see you in the community, and maybe we can meet up again 6 months from now, a year from now,
Absolutely.
whatever the situation is, or you want to talk about a new book that's going to come out. I'd certainly love to have you back on the podcast, and vice versa. If you want to
Thank you.
invite me anytime to come to your podcast, I'm here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, bye-bye for now.
Bye.